All right, now that we've already got our piers laid out with our blue tape and know where we're going to be excavating, we want to go ahead and start excavating. But before we can start excavating, we need to know what tools we're going to need to use for digging purposes. So the first thing you're going to have is some round tip shovels. As you can see, this shovel's bent, this one is not. This bent shovel will come in very handy whenever you get into the lower excavations, to be able to keep dirt on the shovel to be able to get it out, versus utilizing this one at a deeper depth. You're going to constantly have dirt falling off and that type of thing. So you're going to want to use the bent shovel for those purposes. These are custom made in our shop as well. The next tool that you're going to want to use, and this is going to be your best friend, is a demo hammer with a spade bit. The spade bit looks like this, and it's going to be your biggest tool for excavating the hole very quickly. If you were to just basically approach a hole to dig with the shovel, you would be here because you're going to run into, some compacted soils and different things, and you're just not going to be able to get a lot of material on your shovel every shovel scoop. So with this, you're not looking to dig with it, you're looking to break up the soil. So we're going to want to first off turn it on with this sliding switch, and then it also has an adjustment here for as far as impact power goes and rapid hammer movement. So we'll turn it on. That's what it's going to sound like, and as we move the dial, you can hear the tempo, and then the impact goes way down. Usually you're always going to run this thing at max speed. And then we're just going to start hitting it. Once you have it in, you then want to go ahead and yank back, break up the soil, and that's all you're going to do with it. Now, one thing that you'll see me do is whenever you get this thing down in there and it's penetrated into the soil, you can then yank back on it. You don't be afraid of breaking this tool. This tool is your workhorse. So whatever means necessary to break up that soil, that's what you want to do. Once you get your area in your hole broken up for the top layer, you want to excavate that soil. Now watch how quickly and how much more soil we get out with every scoop. So you're minimizing the amount of scoops that it's going to take to excavate that soil. It's also going to be 100 times more easier to remove the soil because it's already broken up, it's not compacted, and it's very easy to do. Wiggle your shovel around a little bit, keep putting it in, and then keep excavating. We're going to do this until we reach to the bottom of our footing, and then after we get to the bottom of the footing, we're going to go another 18 inches to be able to mount the bracket, as well as 18 inches back up underneath the house, so that way that bracket can seat firmly against the bottom part of the foundation to make a secure fit. And we'll jump over to one of the holes. All right, so we've started excavating our hole, and we ran into a couple utilities. We got a water line, we got a drain line, and then we got it looks like either a gas line or it could be a pressurized water main for the house. You're going to want to make sure you watch out for these. The way you can know that these are in place is whenever you're doing with your demo hammer or with your shovel, you'll be able to feel like a consistency difference. Obviously, whenever you hit something like that and it's not penetrating through with your demo hammer, you want to stop. Don't sit there and continue to ramrod it through, because more than likely it's either A, going to be a big rock, or B, it's going to be a pipe. Either way, you want to move off to the side and then work around it just to make sure it's not a pipe, because the last thing you want to do is have that demo hammer bust through that pipe, and let's say it's water, guess who's taking a nice bath? So this hole here is about halfway done. As you can see, it has the utilities in it. We've worked around the utilities, haven't damaged the utilities, and you know, this is going to be plenty of room to be able to excavate through. The hole next to us here has been excavated and has been dug underneath. And the reason we want to dig underneath is if you look at the bracket that we have, it's got a seat. It's going to have this much sit back up underneath there, which is going to be a total of 7 inches roughly. But you're going to want to leave yourself a little bit more room to be able to mount that bracket in an easy facet and not have to sit there and fight with it. Fight with dirt. The last thing you want to do is yank this bracket back out every time to make sure you get a good fit. So it's better to do it right and do a little bit more the first time than having to yank this bracket in and out of the hole every time. This bracket isn't light. It's probably about 70 pounds. So you can imagine sitting in here, 70-pound bracket, in and out every time. You're gonna get some pretty good workouts in, but you're also gonna wear yourself out to truly maximize the amount of effort you're able to put in for the day. This one here, the face of the footing's been cleaned up. We clean up the footing on this one to where the pipe, the utility pipe is. We don't want to go more because when we put the mount the drive stand, we don't want that drive stand to put pressure on that pipe and cause damage to the pipe or bust the pipe or anything like that. So with this, typically you want to have that footing shaved back like this, roughly anywhere from 4 to 6 inches off of the face of the wall of your house. So this one right here is right around 4 inches, about 3.5. So even 3.5 inches is fine, because the biggest thing is, remember, we have a 7-foot seat on that bracket. We want that to be up underneath as much of the house as we can. So that way all that load is sitting on there and not be eccentrically loaded on the outside of the bracket. And now we'll go to mounting brackets and setting them in holes. All right, so we went ahead and finished out our excavation. We've dug back up underneath the footing. Now we're gonna go ahead and prep the footing. So this is what your footing looks like before. We're gonna flush it up and we'll come right back and we'll show you like a completed, chipped, prepped footing ready for a bracket to be mounted to, it looks like. All right guys, we're gonna go ahead and start chipping. So you're gonna wanna have your demo hammer back again, and then you're gonna wanna swap out this bit. This is your chipper bit. Now to remove these, this is really easy. All you do is take this coupler, push down on it so you see a gap like that, comes straight out. To put it back in, you don't even need to do that. And now you're locked in. So the next thing you want to do is make sure you bring down your dial on your Bosch. You want to be about a 3 or a 4, so that way you're not bouncing around. If you try doing that at a higher RPM, it'll just sit there and shake you to death, and you're not going to make any progress on actually smoothing out the footing.
That's all right. I believe in that too. All right.
All right, so now we're going to go ahead and mount our bracket for the second time.
Dang.
You're going to have to wedge the bracket up underneath there to make sure it's flush and straight up and down with your footing. And once it's in there, we're going to head and put the level on it, and then we're going to start cranking the jack to bring up the bracket, and then we can go ahead and drill our holes. Now, getting back to digging out your holes, the reason you want to go so far back is because you can see the bit and the demo or the drill is a decent size. It's roughly 2 feet back in length. So we're going to want to make sure we have enough room so that way we can do a straight line with drilling instead of doing at an angle, which then can cause your bolts to go in at an angle, which then when under pressure it can rip the actual bottom of your footing out from those anchor bolts. So we'll go ahead and put that in and go from there. All right, so we're going to drill the top hole, never the bottom hole. The reason being is you want to have as much concrete below the footing as possible. You don't want to have that anchor bolt being in like that much footing underneath. So we go to the top one and we're going to drill in roughly about 3 or 4 inches, just enough to be able to get that wedge anchor installed in there. So John's going to go ahead and go. The biggest thing whenever you're doing it is let the drill do the work. So once you have your hole drilled, you're going to go ahead and bang in your wedge anchor. These are literally just whack them into place, and then once you tighten them, it'll activate a retention ring, which will lock them into the concrete. Now that we have our bracket installed, we're going to go ahead and remove our lifting jack and go ahead and start mounting our drive stand and ram assembly. All right, so now we've mounted our bracket to our footing and now we're ready to start the install process. But before we do the install process, we have to mount our drive stand to our bracket. So John's going to go ahead and do this. Drive stand is definitely not light. It's probably about 120 pounds. Easiest way to do it, just man up, lift it up, and then dangle it over top. So what we're wanting to do is put in the hole, and then we're just going to lift it up and then slide it over top of the existing holes within the bracket. Once the holes are lined up, we're going to drop pins in to secure the drive stand to the bracket. Once that's done, then we can go ahead and put on our hardware and then install our ram system.
Higher maybe, yeah.
Man. All right, the reason that we're putting that block of wood back behind the drive stand and in between the footing is because whenever you're starting to install the pipe or push the pipe down into the soil, once you get to a certain pressure, it's going to want to rotate in. Just because of the eccentric loading, you're not right underneath the footing, and that footing is kind of like a pivot point. So it's going to want to push that thing in. We're just trying to stop it from rotating into the house. Now the reason you put the wood on the footing and not up here on the stucco is because you get to a certain pressure and that stucco framing is going to just basically cave in. You'll indent the house, cause additional damage, and additional money that's going to cost to get it fixed. So always put the wood on the footing, make sure it's footing behind it, not stucco. If you do when you do the bracket and then you zip tie, like now tighten your bolts, that thing won't move at all ever. So John's putting on the eccentric brackets for the pier itself. What this will do is cause the pipe to go straight instead of being able to kick out or pop out as it gets up to a certain loading point. Those are basically, everything is designed to keep that pipe going straight in the ground and not being able to go off to the side or at diagonal or kick back or anything like that. All right, so now we're going to put the ram on. The ram is the actual hydraulic cylinder that's going to go up and down, that's going to drive your pipe into the soil. The ram weighs right around 100 pounds and it just slides into a slot on the drive stand. Now, the reason that we put a bracing or a strap around the drive stand is because that drive stand is just going to be compression fitted in there. So anytime the compression's off, and if it's at an angle, it has a likelihood of coming back and sliding out. And if you're not paying attention, it can come back and hit you right in the kisser. So that's the reason we put the strap on there, to avoid any injuries to yourself, and to make sure that that drive stand stays put within the ram stays put within the drive stand. So now that we got our drive stand installed, we have our ram mounted on our drive stand, we're now ready to start pushing pipe. So first things first, thing you want to do is make sure you have all your material laid out next to you. This one we're projecting to go about 20 feet, so we're going to have 5 to 6 sections of pipe sitting here. The last thing you want to do is being able to have to get up and out of your hole to grab more pipe while you're doing install. Just because once you start installing, you want to keep being able to install and catch up to the guys that are excavating. Usually there's one guy installing while I got 2 guys that are excavating. It just keeps a steady pace. Obviously, if the holes are deeper, the dig time's taking longer. You may have to dig out a few more to give you a head start, so that way you can continue driving once you start. Once the guys have started finished digging, they can then come back and start mounting the bracket hardware on the brackets that have already been installed. So some of the tools that you're going to want to have with you when you go to mount a bracket and when you go ahead and install your drive stand and your drive cylinder, you're always going to want to have an impact with a 3/4 inch socket. These are going to be used for your anchor bolts. You want to have a ratchet and a 7/8 socket. These are going to be for your nuts on your bracket assembly, the kick-out brackets that we had. You're also going to want to have a hammer next to you, and it's always good to have a vice grips. Now, something that you're going to have prior to when you're mounting your bracket is we have these jack stands. So the jack stand sits right up underneath your bracket, and then you tighten it and it'll mount that bracket up tight. Once the bracket's up tight, we can then drill out our holes for the bracket assembly itself to mount to the footing. Once the holes have been drilled out, we're going to leave that jack stand assembly in place, and we're going to take our 5.5 inch length by 1/2 inch wide wedge anchors. We're going to position your nut all the way at the end like this to then go ahead and hammer them in. We'll place them in the holes, and then we're just going to pound them in. You can also use a socket on this if you want to give you a little bit more extension, a little bit more surface area to hit against. Now, the reason you put the nut all the way to the outside is because if you left it like that, you're going to damage threads and anything like that. So if you ever have to take this off, you're then going to be fighting it trying to get the nut off. So always bring the nut flush or a little past being flush with the end of the bolt, so that way you can have a solid surface to hit on. All right, now we're going to go ahead and hook up our hose assembly from our pump to our ram system. The fittings you want to make sure are cleaned out. We use brake parts cleaner to clean the end of them. Any dirt that's in there can have a leaking effect to that joint or that fitting whenever it's tightened up and you start getting pressure or fluid running through them. The way these fittings work is they're basically two ball valves that are going to butt up against each other. Once they're tight, fluid's able to pass through. Once they're disconnected, those ball valves are pushed out to stop any additional fluid from coming out. So now we're going to go and start the pump. You want to put your throttle in the choke mode. Make sure your pressure lever valve is in the neutral position, and we're going to crank away. Maybe do one tick on that.
It's usually got gas in it or what?
It's got mad gas. I filled it up before I even got here.
Rule number one, make sure there's gas in your pump.
You guys are killing me.
Oh, there it is.
And here, come over this side. So now that our pump is started, we're going to be able to start doing the install. The way we control the movement of the ram is with this lever. This way is going to make the ram go down and extend that drive assembly and drive that pipe into the soil. To retract it, we're going to turn the lever the other way and it'll retract that ram cylinder back up so you can add additional sections of pipe. The gauge is super important. We monitor every section of pipe. We're going to log the PSI value that it's taking to install that pier. So as we're installing here, you can see where pressure is starting to spike. Once you see it rapidly spiking, you know you're getting into some really solid soils, but then it's bouncing. So it's kind of staying pretty steady, and we're still able to continue to drive. Once this thing, see, that was a hard layer. Now you're coming back down in pressure. You want to see continuous movement going up, but you also don't want to overstress the footing when you're doing an install. Yeah, so John just ran out of stroke. When you run out of stroke on the pump, go ahead and hit it again. You'll see a spike. It'll give you like that spike means you're out of stroke and you're just building up pressure because it doesn't have enough fluid or nowhere left to go for the fluid to travel. So then you got to start retracting your pipe. Want to talk about the shorty purpose? Yeah.
Well, probably let them know it's just a regular pipe we cut the bottom.
So with this, it's called a spacer because we only have so much stroke on our ram and our pipe's 3.5 feet long. So we have to use a section of pipe to get another stroke to be able to insert another piece of pipe. Now the pressure's rising really fast, so I say we're done.